I want to start perhaps by asking Ebru how you, and as a company, target that older age group. Is this something you're really fixated on at the moment?
I have to say yes. The reason why I said I have to say yes is because I think the high street brands have already exploited the teenage group of consumers too much. And we're kind of compelled to try to look for other resources in terms of consumers, in terms of how we can really harness the product better to suit the consumer's needs. And definitely the 40 plus, the baby boomers.
Is this very recent, or have you been looking at this for some years?
Yes.
Because obviously in the fabric business and denim business, you're looking further ahead. You're looking a long way down the line often, aren't you?
Yes, that's quite recent. I would say since 2 seasons, which is, I've been working with Orta for 25 years. And this is the first time that we're targeting kind of a different consumer age group specifically, and trying to kind of like understand what they need.
We could come on to the detail of that later, but I'd just like to bring in Ian, and perhaps you can also answer that same question in broad brushstrokes, certainly, to give us a feel of how you're looking at the older age group and understanding maybe the John Lewis target customer.
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, most people know that John Lewis probably over-index in the 50-plus category anyway as our core customer. So it's something that's always been top of our mind. It's not something that's new to us. It's a sector of the market that we're very passionate about and that we know that we need to cater for. However, the way that we're catering for them at the moment is changing very rapidly. Modern Rarity, as you mentioned earlier, not to get a plug in, believe me, but when we started thinking about introducing this range, it was specifically at looking at what we could offer to that older demographic that didn't feel or look old. And I think that's definitely the way that we're beginning to kind of address that audience, is that it's not actually about their age, it's about what they want to wear. And I think it's just a very subtle but important way of looking at that demographic.
It's a very fundamental thing, isn't it? The old don't feel old anymore. So what do we call them?
Consumers. You know, we are consumers, and I say we because I am part of that demographic. And you know what? I don't feel old. You know, sometimes when I wake up in the morning, yeah, sure, because I am getting old. But I don't want to look old. I don't feel old. I don't want to be addressed as an older person, and certainly not talked about in terms of being classic or in terms of being sensible. You know, I want clothes and I want products that relate to me as a consumer and to my lifestyle.
And that's really interesting because all of us here are in that target market. I fear tragic panel this is, but do you think are there areas in our own personal lifestyles, the four of us here, that mirror what the market research is telling us about these consumers? Emily, do you feel that?
Yeah, definitely for me, I've found that in the last 5 years, my lifestyle preferences have really changed, basically because my children have grown up. And so I have a 22-year-old and I have a very independent teenager as well. But those things mean that, basically that means that I no longer have to own a car, which is quite interesting. And I have the luxury of time at the weekend, which affords me the fantastic luxury of being able to maybe we walk across London for 2 hours, and then I'm finding I use taxis a lot. That's probably one of my indulgences, is I'll go for a long walk and then get a cab back. I seem to spend a lot more money at the hairdressers and on beauty and sort of quite indulgent beauty treats. And constantly, sort of personally and professionally, I agree with Ian, I'm looking for on the lookout for product that really addresses the fact that I'm I'm quite comfortable in my own personal style. I have a very set style now. But I'm not interested in brands who are chasing every trend. I think that's quite key, and that you are actually looking, out for these sort of touch points of authenticity, integrity, product quality, while still being fashionable.
Ebru, do you want to join our therapy session here and share with us your personal experiences as well, and how that feeds perhaps into your work?
Actually, the Stan Smith product, the heritage, and I think denim possesses that already within the product itself. And with the technology enhancers, what we've done with the denim base itself, it doesn't need to be rigid product anymore. You know, we used to have all these fabrics which are 100% rigid, and we used to like try really hard to get into our jeans and stuff. So it's not valid anymore. And we try to look at the product as a enhancer for the consumer, and within the age audience that we're referring to, it's great. I mean, it's a great base. It's a great base to, again, promote the heritage of the denim fabric, going back again to the Stan Smith example, and building even a different kind of product base for the younger generation. So it's kind of like taking it from another end, and that's how we kind of like do the product development cycle.
Ian, the 50 plus generation, what they seem to want in fashion isn't so radically different now from what, let's say, the 30 plus generation want. Is it just about size and fit, or is there more to it than that?
That's quite a tricky one, I think, because ultimately we as a business, and I can only relate it to how we work at the moment, we try not to talk about age, and for that very reason, we don't want to rule out anybody. You know, we don't think that anything should be particularly age specific. So it's not that we think that the older demographic will wear what 30-year-olds wear, or that 30-year-olds will wear what 50 plus will wear. It's more about targeting just clothes that have great fit, great quality, great value for money. Obviously, comfort and adaptability are very important, and those elements are possibly the ones that actually resonate slightly more with an older customer. But we've kind of found from a look and a feel, it is more about just making sure that the product is beautiful and great. And if we do that, and if we make sure that the fit and all of those elements are right, then we sell that product to 25-year-olds up to 75-year-olds. It doesn't seem to make any difference.
It's interesting, the language of describing clothes. I mean, I've done copywriting for Hugo Boss for about 10 years or so, and the word that was always banned was comfort. And then last week I was working on some copy, and comfort was suddenly accepted. You know, it's so much part of this athleisure thing. It's suddenly a good word to use. Do you feel that as well, that comfort has become central to what fashion for the 50-plus market should be about?
Absolutely, and it is through the whole well-being and athleisure trend that we've seen it is just growing massively in the market. It's probably the biggest growth area that we've seen coming through, and comfort is kind of top of that list. It's about function and about clothing actually working for you and with you. It's no longer good enough just to look good. You have to also feel good, and that's important.
In denim technologies, there's still a great deal to do in terms of comfort. Is there still a lot more we can do to improve stretch and fit and those kind of things?
Yes, I think we started with like 15% stretch and gone up to 80%. And we have all these concepts which we refer to as fits well, body science. You know, the denim has become like the second skin. So literally like the second skin. And now we're adding other comfort elements like how we can make the fabric feel like cashmere-like, you know, without making it too expensive. So because, you know, we still have to cater to a certain group of consumers. Denim industry is a huge industry with close to 8 billion meters of fabric produced globally. So as Orta, we always take it into consideration how we can keep the value added and the heritage integration of the denim fabric and still cater to all these comfort and, you know, athleisure concepts, all these needs.
Emily, going back to language again, authenticity, heritage, two other classic words that are used a lot, not just in fashion, but in many industries. But do you think these words are being debased, being overused? Do you think they still have a validity?
I think one key thing that I find is that with 40, 50 plus is that to support what Ian was saying, maybe we're really not chasing all of those trends. So the retailers and brands that really appeal to us have other values. That's not the priority. It's not to be chasing every seasonal trend. It's really looking at other values. So I think heritage often comes up because I think some of the most successful brands are riffing on a kind of archive, and some people who do it really cleverly. I did mention Fred Perry earlier. I think they do it brilliantly because they capture a new audience by constantly innovating and being cool, but they also are very aware of their own brand heritage and keep the older audience engaged. And then I think if you look at brands like COS, I think they appeal particularly well to a 40, 50 plus consumer because they really address the issue of quality and sizing perfectly, but allow you to impose your own identity into an outfit. I think for this audience, those three words are really quite key and will continue to be key.
Interesting, one of the areas you focused on was the need to simplify, and it'd be interesting to explore how much beyond fashion that strategy can be applied. Do we create too much product in whatever product choices we're making? Your new seventh brand, is it? Yes, that's fairly focused, isn't it? Is that quite deliberate?
Yes, and part of the ethos of this brand was around fewer, better things. That was our kind of mantra. So it was about providing beautiful things, but less of them, and kind of a bit of an antidote against fast fashion. And I think certainly for the older demographic, that's really important. I think the fast fashion market is incredibly important, and we play in that to a certain extent from brands that we stock. However, it is incredibly saturated. And I think there is a desire, I think, out there from consumers to buy less, to have less stuff, and to buy better, so that things last a little longer, you cherish them a bit more, and you don't mind spending a little bit more on them.
Well, maybe we've reached a kind of peak fast fashion, and us oldies can lead the revolution where we return to simplification. Do you find that with the denim offer that you make to customers, that you've reduced it and focused it more?
Definitely. When I started working for Orta, we only had like 5 denim bases, and it peaked to over 1,000. And once you do that, the manufacturing floor just explodes. So you have to go back. You have to really go back to the very basics, still keeping the technology integrated there, still innovating, still trying to build in the value added, but simplifying. That's, I think we're at this tipping point of what seems like a manufacturing industrial revolution, which actually is a social revolution. And we're seeing the whole impact all throughout the supply chain. And, sitting at the very, very end of the supply chain, we have to consider this. We have to really consider this.
I remember the first time I went to Hugo Boss, I spent the whole day looking at suits, like suit after suit after suit, every subtle variation known to man and woman. And at the end, I said, right, can I go home now? And they said, no, you've got shirts tomorrow. And, that has changed radically. Now it's a much tighter, focused range, far more unconstructed, far more relaxed tailoring, and a far smaller choice, which is still enormous for a big company like that, but is far smaller than before. Can we just deal, though, with the fundamentals that fashion is facing, or having to face this huge threat that the consumer really, for Christmas, does not want anything fashionable, they want technology, yeah? And my kids don't want fashion, they want iPad, they want the tablet, they want everything, but that's connected with technology. Is this something that you're talking about all the time in your jobs, Ian?
Obviously, because I work for a department store and we have a huge electrical business, it's something that's very much part of our everyday language. And this peak trading period for us is primarily about that department. I mean, they do take the most sales around this time of year.
That is the most important trading period of the entire year, isn't it?
Yes.
So
this final part is the most important.
So you
part.
guys are losing out big time.
Not really, though. Although a lot of sales go towards the electrical side, what we call it EHT, part of our business, what we see pick up in this period is gifting, and it is all about gifting. So fashion as a whole probably stays pretty constant. We don't see that massive uplift, but what we do see an uplift in is all the giftable items. So accessories definitely become a huge part of what happens in Christmas. And tech-related accessories specifically see an even bigger uplift because they're quite often an additional purchase to a tech purchase as well. So it's not as great as we would hope it to be, but it's certainly not terrible at this time of year.
Emily, do you think that the fashion sector needs to work more closely with the tech sector and for synergies or learnings?
Yeah, I think an interesting point is the fact that we did some reporting recently that showed that the 40-plus sector is actually a fantastic target for tech generally, purely because we have the most disposable income and are truly engaged and really kind of intrigued and wanting to consistently learn. And definitely the sort of financial aspect is key to that. And in terms of sort of fashion meets tech, yeah, I mean, we're exploring more and more kind of ways in which this is going to happen. I think, you know, it's been slow to date, but certainly it's something that we're exploring more and more.
I want to move on a bit to the athleisure phenomenon, which is a phenomenon, isn't it? Because I think maybe 3 years ago it might have been perceived as something that might be a two-season wonder, and yet it's turned into this thing that seems to be changing the whole of fashion, and every tailoring company is having to rethink rather radically. Were you surprised by that, Ebru?
We kind of expected it. We saw it coming, and initially the whole denim industry was very scared that it would take away a lot from the denim industry. But I think the product development just came in at the right time, enhancing the denim fabric base to actually kind of like start serving the athleisure concept. And I think it was like 3 years ago, we were in a fashion show where we were introducing denim made into like leggings, which felt really extremely comfortable, which then really opened up a whole different era of product development where we started looking at different blends, different fibers, you know, again, enhancers, like, you know, whatever we can to put more value on the product. And the great example is, again, I would refer to the heat tech with Uniqlo. So we develop a lot of heat techs, actually.
Can you explain for those in the audience who aren't aware what you mean? Can you tell us a little more about that?
So, you know, the denim fabric base becoming something that serves you, that serves your body. And it just kind of like, you feel the plus and minus 4 or 5 degrees on your body through the technology. It's all these different kind of technologies integrated into the fabric base. And we feel that the 40 pluses, they understand this and they value this impact much more than the younger generation. And, you know, then you open up a different discussion with the brands. And it's very, very important to start talking with the brands about the technology so that they can take it on to their consumers. So we've done a lot of collaborations with brands because it's become very important from a storytelling perspective to tell the story of the product and, you know, explain it to the consumer why it's better.
Fascinating. Ian, I mean, when we look back at this decade in 10 years' time, will we see as athleisure defining the fashion of this decade? Do you think it's going to be that big?
I'm not sure that it will necessarily define the decade as a style. I think what we will have seen is a general uplift in well-being. I think it's far more about consideration, and I think that's the thing that has the big reflection onto fashion. It's this thought process behind everything. The fact that I think these days people want some meaning. You know, I think storytelling is a really interesting part in fashion and around provenance and also around what the inherent qualities of a garment mean, and therefore will potentially persuade you to buy it. And I think that's connected to this whole thoughtfulness that I think this decade is throwing out. And I think that the well-being is part of that. And I think athleisure is almost kind of the end result of all of that thinking.
What about marketing to the older demographic, Emily? I mean, is it about simply using some older models they can identify with, or do we have to really fundamentally rethink?
I think it is actually one of the biggest issues. It goes back to Ian's point that we might not necessarily be looking at a different, appropriate garment to a 25-year-old, but it's the way it's sold to us and it's sort of what the kind of integrity of that product is. I think the marketing is a massive issue. We're definitely seeing some big shifts. We've just recently reporting, this week actually, we're reporting on some key 60-plus influencers on social media. We're seeing different voices come through from such a width of generations now, and it's starting to people are starting to take this on board. I think using a more inclusive approach to models is really key. That's why we're seeing cool new model agencies opening up, like Mrs. Robinson. And Saint Laurent obviously recently used Marianne Faithfull and a couple of other 60-plussers in their campaign for their permanent collection. I think that the marketing is a really key piece, and that is definitely true cross-industry. Gone is the sort of saga image of a cruise-going, passive lifestyle.
Yeah, there's something rather funny about looking at the oldie ads in something like those saga magazines, and they need to...
Back of the Daily Mail.
Yes, exactly. Iba, any comments on that subject?
I would say that the denim is ageless and genderless. So we're kind of sitting at the better end of the fashion industry, but we have a lot of work to do because, as Emily mentioned, denim in the textile industry is the second biggest polluter, and the social impact produced through the textile industry is huge. And sitting on the more fortunate end doesn't mean we can shut our eyes to all of this. So it's our duty to take action, which we are trying very hard, and to communicate that message to the consumer as well.
Brilliant, thank you. A final comment before we close this panel from Ian, mainly focusing again on that marketing aspect and how John Lewis has maybe changed in its approach or hasn't changed.
I would say we probably haven't changed our approach to how we advertise. We generally try to not use models that are too young because, again, it doesn't really reflect our demographic or appeal to our core customer. However, again, it's more about getting a model for us that matches the brand and matches the look rather than the age. Age, apart from ruling out anybody that is too young, isn't really a question that comes up for us because we just try not to focus on it too much.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much to our panel. Really interesting conversation that we can continue later. Thanks a lot.